Welcome to 3 Count Commentaries. This is your host, MagMongoSlade. Today, we're going to talk about the AEW Women's Division, specifically Lufisto, who had an extensive interview with Fightful where she let it all off of her chest about her terrible experience backstage in AEW and the people that mistreated her. So this is going to be interesting. There's not a lot of backstage stories about AEW, and some of them that have come out, they haven't been pleasant, but some of them have. It's been a mixed bag, but this is probably one of the more negative ones so far. Now, before we go any further, I think it's only fair that I tell everybody who Lufisto is. So Lufisto is a female wrestler who's been on the independents for most of her career. She's never really made it anywhere. Now she's in her 40s, and she gets a tryout to AEW, and it's an AEW dark match, and I think it was a 6-woman tag or something like that. So that set everything up to let you know what's going on here. So Lufisto has been around for a really long time. She's worked a lot of the women's companies and stuff like this. So to give you the full context, Taya Valkyrie, Britt Baker have a bad match. Britt Baker responds with, stop bullying and all this kind of stuff. People saying they want the women's division to be booked better. So Lufisto goes on Twitter and says, quote, "It's cute how people blame booking for a bad women's division. Talent with too much power, talent denigrating each other, talent trash talking potential employees so they never get in. As soon as they walk in, it starts here. Signed, the one you called effing French Canadian asshole." So everybody was wondering what's going on here. She was, making this comment in relation to the Britt Baker situation. So everybody thought she was talking about Britt Baker. So then she gets into it with some guy who's known on the message boards, and she gets into an argument with him. And she says, these people start saying, spill the beans, say names, yada yada yada. So she says, "This is the first time I say something publicly after over a year. I'm not going to throw names on an app with limited characters. There are several details and a context to explain the whole story with accuracy, which I will do when the opportunity arises." So she continues to argue with people online as they try to defend Britt Baker. The name Ruby Soho comes up. One of the people that apparently had offended her or, pissed her off or something like that. And that was just one person. She said just because there's one doesn't mean that there aren't others. Then later on, when it was found out that she didn't really get an opportunity in AEW, she says, "No worries, no need for such a toxic environment in my life." So you know how the dirt sheets go. As soon as she put that out there, the dirt sheets want to know the deets. They want the whole story. So Fightful, apparently, I guess they paid her to have a sit down and talk about this thing. So on August the 3rd, 2023, they put out the transcript of the interview of what's been going on with Lufisto and AEW. Now, again, she's going to explain it. I don't want to read this entire thing because it is very long. I do want to read some of the more important bits, though. Here's one of the important bits that she's not going to be naming names with the exception of a few people. She says that things I heard from other women that are working there and that had tryouts there that were extras, as well as men who are currently employed. Of course, I know people want names and everything, but I'm willing to give the names of people involved in my story. But of course, if anybody did confide in me in something, I can share the story, but out of respect, I'm not going to share the name of someone who doesn't want to lose the job or is looking for a job. So basically, she's not going to tell the story of people and drop names and just try to cash in on this thing completely. So what happened? First, she gets an offer to be a coach. This is what she was talking to QT Marshall about. So the first part of this thing is about how QT Marshall is inviting her to, I believe it was Boston, to do a coaching tryout. That's the initial thing. So she sets the seeds for some of the, as she says, the lack of structure in AEW immediately. As she talks about, they want her to come to Boston on short notice from Canada. And they wanted her to have a PCR test or a blood test or something like that, something she cannot do in a very quick amount of time. And they instead just dropped the issue instead of saying, well, get that to us when you can or whatever. They just dropped it and just said, forget it, come to Boston. So you already know something's going on. So now she's backstage, and this is where we're going to start the story. She says, I go in and meet Sean Dean. He's really nice. The extras change in the shower where the women are. I'm sitting around. I'm waiting for Tony Khan. That's the thing. The match is cool, but I want to meet Tony because of the coaching job. The first person I see is the bunny. I say, hi. She looked at me. What are you doing here? I'm hoping to get something. I guess is the response. She goes away, comes back a bit later and asks me the same question. I say, I hope I have a coaching job. It's a little chaotic. People are running around. I go into the ladies' locker room and silence. There is Ruby, Bunny, and Tony Storm sitting together on one side. They look at Martinez. She's happy to see me. And Jade Cargill is overdoing her thing. So then she starts mentioning how a young wrestler, who she didn't name, came up to her and said that AEW needs somebody like her there. And then Lufisto says, okay, well, it's that bad, huh? And then the young wrestler, she says, quote, then she makes a face like we need you. Then I'm starting to kind of put things together. Thunder Rosa is sitting on one side. No one is talking to her. One guy's to talk to her. I don't know if it's an agent. I couldn't see from afar. Everybody is in their own thing. It's weird, but I'm not used to this environment. So she's talking about how isolated certain people are, right? So Thunder Rosa is not part of the clique. She's off to the side. Everybody else is sort of clicked up together doing their own thing. Then she says, I'm waiting around for Tony. Nothing. I go backstage. I walk around, meet Christian. Very nice. I talk to Mark Henry. I meet Dustin Rhodes, and he's talking to me about where I trained and his daughter. By this time, it's really late. It's almost 5. I go see Mercedes Martinez. Do we know what we're doing? What's going on? Mercedes Martinez responds, we always know at the last minute. Time goes by. I see the card, and the first wrestler who said they wanted to wrestle me, she said they won't let me. That sucks because I really like her. So Lufisto meets this young female wrestler backstage who apparently wants to wrestle her, but the card was not finalized. And then when the card was finalized, they weren't wrestling each other. I mean, that kind of happens. You don't get to control your own creative. She says, I end up in a 6-woman, and they kept cutting our time. I see people complaining everywhere because they're not on the card. They came to Boston. They're not wrestling. It's really chaotic. She continues, I hear something about CM Punk, but I just saw him at catering. He was doing really nice, and he was nice to see me. It feels like high school. There is no unity for some reason. They tell me I'm going to have an entrance. I thought as an extra I would not. I run to my car, get my jacket, go back in. I go to the restroom. As soon as I open the door, I hear she something. I open the door, and on the table, Ruby Soho is sitting with Dustin Rhodes, and they just shut up. And they look at me. And it feels like, okay, they were talking about me. That's for sure. Ruby is like, I have to go. Then I go to Dustin Rhodes, and he says, so all French Canadian people are fucking assholes, huh? I'm like, excuse me? What? He was nice to me 5 minutes ago. He's like, yeah, apparently that's how it goes. I have a bad relationship with Jacques Rougeau. I can say he was even abusive to me, calling me to tell me I was fat and to lose weight. I'm like, maybe he had a bad experience with Jacques too. He's looking at me differently, and the funny thing is, Evil Uno walks by, and he's like, hey, Uno, that's true. French Canadians are fucking assholes, right? Uno is like, I'm French Canadian. Oh, okay. They talk a little bit. I'm there, but I just leave. I'm like, what the fuck just happened? I love Dustin. I even wrote him messages thanking him for the keep stepping thing because it was very inspiring. But I'm like, what the fuck just happened? So she walks in on a conversation between Ruby Soho and Dustin Rhodes, where as soon as she walks up, the conversation ends, which is, as an introvert, that is one of my nightmares, is that I walk into a room and people just start laughing for no reason, or they just stop what they're doing and look at you. I can't stand that. So I understand why some people might think, oh, she's being paranoid, and that might be true. But she's going to explain why the Ruby Soho thing is specifically a problem. So she goes over how they're talking about the match backstage, the 6-woman tag. So to give you a little color about the 6-woman tag, it is The Bunny, Emi Sakura, and Lufisto versus Ruby Soho, Anna Jay, and Sky Blue. And this was the April the 11th, 2022 episode of AEW Dark. Putting together the 6-woman tag ended up being a nightmare for them. So one of the things that she says, one thing I noticed is Sky Blue is not saying a word. They tell her what to do. Anna Jay, of course, gives her piece, and she says, I realize I'm the only one not signed in this match. Why am I there? At this point, I don't know. They told me I'm going to start with Sky Blue. Then apparently she asked Sky Blue, what do you want to do? What are your moves, etc.? And she says, quote, it's like either she's bland as a person or she's not allowed to talk. I don't know if she didn't understand while I was asking her for stuff. I was weird. So I don't know if she meant she was weird. I don't know. But interestingly enough, hasn't that been the thing I've been saying with Sky Blue, is that she's very awkward, you know? So apparently in this situation, they were going over the match and Sky Blue just had nothing to say. She had nothing to add. Now, granted, Sky Blue is one of her opponents in this match, but they still have to work together. I mean, that's just the nature of the business. How can she work if she doesn't know what Sky Blue's stuff is? What is Sky Blue going to do? What is she, what kind of bumps does she like to take? Or, what kind of bumps she doesn't want to take? They go through this stuff during these matches. Don't hit me here. Don't hit me there. I'm not really good with power drivers or whatever the case may be. And she's not getting anything. So she's not getting any feedback over what to do and how to work in this match. But then she goes through this sort of crazy back and forth where she kind of does everybody else's voices and stuff like this. And they go through the finish. And the finish, it seems very convoluted. I think if by reading it, maybe if I saw it, it wouldn't be so bad. But ultimately, they go through the match and they get the finish. They get to the finish. Everything's kind of out of whack. And then Lufisto says, we go backstage and they all keep going. Dustin is right there and is like, what did you do? I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, you made all those girls that are signed when you're not look really bad. It was terrible. And she says, okay, details. And he says, you should have bumped on everything they did. So he's criticizing her work, and she kind of tries to explain what her role in the match was. And she says, I have 40 seconds in there. She says, sir, can you please give me details on what I should have done better so I don't repeat it? And then he goes through about how Anna Jay did something to her on the apron. And then she's like, okay, thank you, I see. He says, of course, everyone left. No one is there when he's giving me this criticism. Billy Gunn is nearby. I look around and I'm like, can someone please tell me I suck this bad? I need another opinion. He was looking at me like I was disgusting. So I'm guessing she's talking about Billy Gunn. And she's complaining, saying, they told me to stay on the apron. They didn't want, I come in, I did very little, which is what they wanted. She says, the thing I was thinking about was there were a few girls that told me they had matches with Britt Baker where they would go in the ring and they would change the match completely. Or if the girl forgot something, she would go, where are we? Silence. Of course the match would look bad. They would never be called again, and they got stiffed as well. They didn't want to stiff me, but they made sure to at least an agent I looked like a fucking idiot. I went around and asked some guys, did you watch the match? One of them told me I did not, but I will. So what she's explaining in this situation is that through silence, they are, in a way, compromising the match. Because if you forget something, somebody calls a move and you forget it, or you put it together backstage and then you forget, the opponent's supposed to tell you, okay, backdrop or power slam or whatever, to remind you of where you're supposed to go next. But apparently Britt Baker and her crew don't do that. They don't say anything to you, and then you just stand out there looking dumb. And apparently that's just a thing that they do. So now we're tying this thing together, right? We see now that if, a certain clique within AEW are not a fan of yours, they will let you look dumb, even if it wastes television time, even if it makes the match look terrible. So now we have to look into, how Britt Baker has performed against people like Taya Valkyrie, where she basically fell on her face and didn't really try to aid in any way of saving that spot. How she's tried to make Thunder Rosa look bad. How she's done these little things over and over again is because there's no communication. And there's no communication because, well, they're in with the office. It's not going to be that they look terrible. It's going to be that you look terrible. And so when she comes back, when Lufisto comes back, she's getting criticized. There were 6 girls in that match. And apparently she was the one who was singled out as the one who made everybody else look bad. So that's what you have to think about as we're talking about this stuff. And as she said, she was the only one in that match that was not signed. Even though I'm not sure if Sky Blue was signed at the time. I think Sky Blue might have been just a regular that they were using a lot. And she was basically on the verge of being signed anyway. But it says a lot that she is the only one who gets criticized in this situation. They basically leave her to it because Billy Gunn and Dustin Rhodes apparently don't know what they talked about before the match or what they talked about before they went into the match. So they don't know where her role was supposed to be. And they're judging the match and she's the one making everybody else look bad, at least to them. But that's by design because they don't like her. So we're going to talk about that in a minute. So here comes some of the heavy criticism. She says, I changed and I'm still waiting. There is Tony. The match, forgot about it. You're here for coaching. I go to a wrestler I've known for years. I'm like, so how was it? It was short. Yeah, they don't really watch our matches here. I've been doing Chris Benoit moves for the past month and no one even knows. They don't care. Where's the structure? Pretty much do what we want. I'm not saying that in a good way. I sit down and I watch the show and I wait. I see Sammy Guevara with his girlfriend. They were going out to the car before, coming back in. It's chaotic. And there is literally people sitting at one point and they talk shit to each other. I'm with fucking children. Now, again, Lufisto is in her 40s now. She was in her 40s then, okay? So last year, I think she's 43 or 44 now. So she might have been 42 or 43 last year. She had already been in the business for a long time. A lot of the people she's working with here are very young. A lot of them, many of them are in her age group. And then she continues by saying somebody is talking shit on one side. The other guy is talking shit, but they don't talk shit to each other. They talk about each other. At this point, with everything that happened, do I really want to be here? I would be good as a coach. I know I'm good at that. Of course, I don't meet Tony. I don't see my opponents. They completely vanished. So then she continues on AEW's lack of communication. She says a few days later, I emailed QT to see what's going on. So as she's waiting to get a response from QT Marshall, she has a back and forth with the person who said they would watch the match. And apparently the person watched the match and is criticizing her and gave her some of the same criticisms that she herself had for the match. So I would have to go through the spot, and I don't want to do that. And I'm certainly not going to watch the match. But it's convoluted and it involves ring psychology about when you should pin somebody and that sort of stuff. And Lufisto was asked not to pin somebody in this situation, but instead to just tag out. So she didn't. And in that situation, the veterans are criticizing her for not pinning in that situation when she was told not to. So now she's back at home and she's having issues getting paid. She says, the show was in April. I was able to get it in July, and that's after I asked Dean, QT, and another woman. They were like, we send it by mail, but there is a thing about this Canadian address. I looked at my W-9, everything was okay, but I was like, why the hell did nobody ask me about my work visa? I have a work visa, and nobody asked me. I give them my PayPal. Oh, we sent it already, and it's not working. Another promoter just sent me money, and it's working. The lady was upset, and finally I got it. After that, I tried reaching out to QT, never answered me. I tried reaching out to Dean, never answered me. When they came to Canada, I was like, let's try this. I sent a message. Hey, I'd like to be an extra in Canada. Completely ghosted me, whether it's phone, Twitter, email, not even an answer, a no, nothing. It's like a long story to explain how it went for me. But the thing that got me mad with the booking is there is no structure. The booking is all over the place. The problem at AEW is there is a structure of power. A structure of power, she says. Well, look, Tony Khan, as a promoter, should not have any problems paying anybody, if we're being honest. You know how to pay people, bro. and saying we sent a check by mail in 2022. Who the hell are you, the federal government? Why are you sending checks by mail? Why are you sending checks by mail? But there's actually been other wrestlers who have complained that they had problems being paid by AEW. While we're on the subject of pay, just to remind you, there was a story in 2020, December of 2020. This is from Ringside News. An OVW wrestler by the name of Dylan Bostic was attacked by AEW wrestlers after he complained that he was stiffed about $80 on his pay. So it says Dylan Bostic got on Twitter today and released a statement about AEW cutting his pay as an extra 60%. This was not the right day to take a shot at AEW, as the loss of Brody Lee is still very heavy with everyone in the company. Britt Baker jumped online and replied to Bostic's tweet. She called him out for his awfully timed statement. She also dragged him for wearing ripped jeans and a t-shirt to the building for Dynamite. Joey Janela replied to Bostic and he said, quote, "To be honest, it's still $80 more than you were ever paid to wrestle." It's unclear if Janela is correct in that statement, but Bostic did not reply to the bad boy. Bostic also did not reply to Ricky Starks, who tweeted, "Bro, do me a favor and shut the fuck up." Dylan Bostic has several people on his timeline begging him to delete the tweet. His defense is that the statement is in reply to accusations Rip Rogers made days ago. This statement was about AEW cutting his pay, might be valid, but it would have been best served for another day. So the company that's supposedly about workers' rights and all the boys standing up for themselves, it's okay for an indie worker to get stiffed on his money because another guy died. I'm sorry, that ain't got nothing to do with me. Where's my money? But this seems to be the mentality. And guess what? Of course, all the AEW fans were right there saying, "Oh, we're grieving at this time." And you're talking about, I think it was $80. The initial tweet was from Rip Rogers. It no longer exists, but it says it was screenshotted by somebody. That's how I'm able to read it. It says Dylan Bostic and Flash Flanagan worked TV for AEW. They were short at $80 a piece from what they were promised. They are still holding their breath, waiting to get what was promised to them. This was in December of 2020. Dylan Bostic says, "I was actually shorted $120 twice, but who's counting? Thanks for sticking up for me, Rip." And then, of course, he's attacked by fans, Joey Janela, etc. This is a guy who is not, going to main event WrestleMania. He is a regular blue-collar pro wrestler, the same kind of guy most of these people claim to be, the kind of guy who's doing the hot dog circuit, the kind of guy who probably sleeps in his car, the same kind of guy who has all those stories that you hear about when it comes time for AEW. But this guy is actually in that mode. He hasn't worked his way out of it yet and probably never will. But even if that was the case, he gets stiffed. He doesn't get paid. And people are just kind of like, "Shut up, I'm grieving." What do you mean? That ain't got nothing to do with him. And it's like $120, which is nothing to Tony Khan. It's literally pocket change to Tony Khan. But it's a lot for this guy. You have to put yourself in that guy's shoes. This is the difference between Vienna sausages and one of those big Eckrich sausages to this dude. It's a difference between, being able to fill up your gas tank to go to the next show. We're not talking about, a petty amount of money. We're talking about a petty amount of money for people who have money, but somebody who doesn't, come on. And no doubt he was probably never used again. It was likely blackballed for complaining. But this is the kind of stuff that we're dealing with here. This is the stuff that Lufisto was talking about. It took them 3 months to pay her. She did the job in April. She didn't get paid till July. That's crazy. Why would anybody put up with that? I'm very surprised that she took that in silence for so long. I'm surprised that wrestlers tend to do that a lot, period, anyway. Now, pay issues is something they seem to suffer in silence for quite a while out of fear of, being blackballed or not used or whatever. But unless you actually trust a promoter, you should not go in the hole to work in a promotion. I'm sorry. Unless you're like at the very bottom of the industry where you're probably lucky to be there and you're probably working for free, which I'm not against people working for free, by the way, as long as it's their own choice. if you agreed to pay them a certain amount of money, there has to be a really good reason why you can't pay them. And if you go to them and you say, look, I can't afford that, then you work it out. But what you don't do is you don't have your people shaming the guy for saying, look, all of you dudes are making, Joey Janela claims that these people are making six figures. So that means Britt Baker, Joey Janela, all the people who are attacking him make 3 or 4 times the money that he was making. And they have the position to be like, shut up. But he doesn't. He's like, yo, this is a major amount of money to me that I'm missing. And for her, it's the same thing. She's an indie wrestler, you know? She can't go 3 months without getting paid. Like, that's crazy. And then if it's a major wrestling promotion, you should be paid. And so I'm really questioning. And again, Dylan Bostic's, that situation was in 2020. Lufisto was in 2022. This was just last year. All right. So I don't know what's going on. Just saying. But let's continue her story. So she begins this part by saying she was upset and spent her own money to get to AEW, and she was upset by that. And then she says she's been thinking that she should have known better, especially with Ruby. And then she tells the story of being backstage at WrestleMania 2016. So she's backstage. She got tickets from Pat Patterson, and she was there with Canyon Ceman, Kimber Lee, the lying ass ex-wife of Zachary Wentz. She was there. Andrea, I don't know who that is. And she says, we were sitting together, and so was Ruby. Canyon comes to sit with us. He says he went to the women's shows. Queen of Combat was the shit. He went to Shimmer. Well, we got what we wanted out of there. The rest was whatever. So Kimberly and Andrea are looking at the floor, and Ruby is like, yeah, I know. And she says, well, you're shitting on Shimmer? From that moment on, I've always had a problem with her. How the fuck can you throw them under the bus just to kiss ass? The funny thing is, he looks at me and says, who are you? She introduces herself, and he says he kind of figured out I was on that show. So Canyon Ceman, who was, works in WWE, goes to a show that Lufisto is on, denigrates the show. Ruby apparently was on that show too, and apparently that's where they signed her. They must have signed her from a Shimmer show. And when he says that he got what they wanted out of that one. So she starts talking about her and Ruby working in Montreal. She says, they want to book her against me. All right, let's do this. 2 days before they announce our match, IWS is freaking out. They have to change everything. They have to redo the card. It's going to be Ruby because of me and all the other girls, which makes 5 of us, is the reason why everything is fucked up. She says, of course, that's what it is. They didn't want to tell me. She shows up. Hey, how you doing? Gives me a big hug. It's nice to see you. I'm like, motherfucker, after everything you think I don't know, I've seen this kind of behavior forever. So apparently there was some AEW strings pulled, and there was all kinds of stuff that was thrown about while Ruby was working in Montreal. Apparently she was trying to avoid her maybe, or whatever. So then she starts talking about why she's having this conversation. Why is she saying this? And she says, everybody's afraid to talk. Everybody doesn't want to say what I'm saying right now. I'm even struggling right now, but someone has to say it. Unfortunately, it's the 43-year-old that's doing it because everybody is so afraid to lose their freaking jobs. They don't want to say anything, and they accept things that they should not be. Somebody has a tryout and you make sure they look bad. I'm not even talking about myself because I don't look that bad. I was told, following the discussions, some girls are asking for guidance and make sure they look so bad they don't come back because there is genuine interest in them. The girls are fighting with each other. I hear it all the time. My ship has sailed. I'm aware of that. One thing, though, I love wrestling with all my heart, so if somebody wants to say I'm bitter, I say fuck you. I go out there every weekend. I love what I do. I've been to court to defend women's wrestling, the things that I do not accept, and it's what's going on in AEW right now. Women shitting on women when they should be helping each other and lifting each other up. If you're not good enough to be out there and prove you can go, and you have to go through politics and people you're with, you don't belong in the sport. Right now, it's filled with people who use wrestling to have that fame. So I'm with her at this point. I'm like, I'm with her, and then she lost me. Men are in charge of the women's divisions. I'll be honest, they don't care. They will put their friends in the spots before the women. If you stay up there because you're in your comfort zone, it's not going to change. You need to stand up. You need to speak your mind. Do it politely. But you can't have people running the whole thing with their friends, with their clique, and expect women's wrestling to change and people to give it time so it matters. It's not going to change if you don't have people who are passionate about women's wrestling. So she's talking about having passion about women's wrestling. Then she goes into her problems with, more problems with Ruby Soho. She wrestled her on the Independents twice, apparently. One time, the claim was that she actually injured Ruby Soho in a match, and they had all kinds of problems. But then she starts talking about the women's division again in both companies. And then she gets to this point, and I think this is very interesting. He says, I'm not going to get a job, but I'm not going to have my 26 years of wrestling wasted on women who do not deserve to be there. Not because they're not good, but because they are terrible human beings. They're narcissists, and they only think about them, and they do not think about women's wrestling as a whole. Hate me, talk shit, I'm ugly, I'm fat, I'm old, I didn't make it, whatever. I heard them all. I don't give a damn. I don't care anymore. One thing I will always care about is that women's wrestlers of today, the ones that came after me in my generation, I don't want them to go through the same bullshit I had. The politics, the abuse, the guys grabbing their asses backstage and being screamed puppies and whore, and that women's wrestling sucks. Women's wrestling sucks if you allow it to. By letting your talent that shouldn't be in charge do what they're doing right now, you're allowing women's wrestling to suck. That's where I draw the line. If I don't get booked anywhere because of this, whatever. At least it's out there. You are destroying what women's wrestling should be. It's going backwards. It's going down. With the talent that is on the indies and the bigger promotions everywhere around the world, that should not be happening. So, she had a lot on her mind. And it feels like somebody had this kind of thing bottled up for a really long time. And there's no reason to question her integrity on this. So I don't see why I shouldn't take what she says seriously. But here is another thing that kind of jumped out at me. Dustin Rhodes, after, a couple of hours after this thing comes out, Dustin Rhodes says, "Hey, Lufisto, read your short story, and sometimes as a coach, I have to be very honest and won't ever tell you a lie about how good or bad it was. Sometimes hard love comes out and wouldn't have it any other way. I hope you're finding what you're looking for. # keep stepping." So he's not backing down about what he said, basically confirming that it's true. So, Dustin Rhodes, after all of this, kind of confirms that it's true. So we've been having a lot of problems with the AEW women's division. And this story shines a really big light on it. In a shocking but not so shocking move, the AEW fan base don't really care about this article or about what Lufisto has been saying. In fact, so many of them are denying that it actually happened. If it was WWE, they believe it. But when it's AEW, oh no, it's not believable. We don't believe it. But despite the fact that Dustin Rhodes basically came out and said that at least some element of what she was saying has some truth to it. It's not like he said, "I've never seen this woman before in my life. I never had a conversation with her," or whatever the case may be. None of that was said. What he said was, well, sometimes, we got to give love harshly. So basically, you had a bad match. I said it was a bad match, and that was it. Your feelings are hurt, or whatever the case may be. But she continued, "The women who actually addressed the problems I did today were the ones sent home by Tony Khan. There was a meeting to shoot on Thunder Rosa that Khan attended. Before leaving, he reminded them that their segments were the lowest. When some girls arranged a meeting to talk about Baker's crew, one of them ran to Britt to let her know. The girls that wanted to address the problem were the ones that were punished. Things didn't get better, they got worse. The legitimate wrestlers believe Tony doesn't give a damn about women's wrestling and feels like they are going back to the Divas era. Ask me who the fuck I am. I tell me I'm irrelevant and that I'm doing this for attention. Call me a liar. Tell me to kill myself. You keep on closing your eyes and supporting human beings with shitty behavior. With the messages of support, and especially this phone call I received from AEW employees, this nobody did the right thing." So, of course, we're all just assuming that she's telling the truth here. I have no reason to question her integrity right now. And again, remember, there was a situation where Athena left WWE and said that, oh, they told us how to dress like, they was teaching us how to dress like Mandy Rose. And everybody believed it, despite the fact that Athena walks around with her butt out throughout the entire time she was in the Indies and continues to do it today. Maybe there was a short amount of time there when she was wearing pants. And people were like, oh my God, they're teaching them girls how to dress like Mandy Rose. Look, it's people's perceptions of these conversations. We can easily say that the people who are talking to Lufisto are disgruntled, they're upset, and they're perceiving a lot of this stuff negatively. We can say that, and that would be true. It is all about your perception. You can have a conversation and feel like maybe you're not being heard. You can have a conversation and feel like people are not listening to you. You can have these conversations and then turn around and say nothing's being done, but it kind of tracks with people who are saying that Tony Khan has put the women's division on the back burner. There has been other women. There's been Britt Baker and Saraya have both come out recently and talked about the women's division. But Britt Baker, when she talked about the women's division, she was mostly attacking the fans. Here's what Britt Baker had to say. This is from Post Wrestling. She apparently had an interview with TV Insider, and she talks about women's wrestling. She says, the fans who hold signs that say to book the women's division better, that's great. Then when I go on Twitter, it doesn't echo that. I don't see the same support. It's, I hate these two wrestlers. This match is too long. This match was too short. If all you see about women's wrestling is all negative online, it doesn't add up to what they are preaching. If you want the women to be booked better, support the women. You don't have to like every wrestler at every match. You also don't have to get on Twitter and preach from the mountaintops how much you hated things. Some stuff, keep to yourself. I can't tell you how many times I go to a restaurant, I don't like how my steak is cooked. I don't need to talk to the chef and take 30 pictures of the steak to tell them I don't like how this steak is cooked. There is too much invested in the negativity that it does so much harm. I hope people realize one day how much harm it does to not only the individuals and mental health, but to the industry as a whole. So it's the fans' fault, it's Twitter's fault that the women aren't booked better, because, hey, you guys hate everybody and you hate everything. So that's why, we don't get a lot of time invested in our storylines. It's because the crowd doesn't really believe in women's wrestling. So interestingly enough, that's been mostly the response to this Lufisto article, and all of her commentary has been negative. It's been, a lot of people have said, this is not the expose you think it is, or this sounds like every other locker room in wrestling, or whatever the case may be, just 100 excuses. Not many people are taking this seriously. And they're not taking it seriously mainly because she worked there, I guess, once, and she hasn't worked there since. And she's bitter, she's angry, she's this, she's that. But again, I have no reason to say that her integrity is in any way in jeopardy. So take this for what you will. But the idea that Britt Baker and her crew are doing terrible things to other people, even if it's not, the absolute worst things in the world, yes, if it was WWE back in the, early 2000s, somebody would have shit in somebody's bag and lit it on fire or something like that, but it's not those days anymore. Now they decided they're going to try to freeze people out, which is, a female bullying tactic. I know a lot of people don't believe that, but freezing people out is a traditional girls bullying tactic. Women do what's called relational aggression. And what that means is they don't really do aggression directly. It's a lot of it is indirect. It's spreading gossip. It's, telling the authorities that something happened when it didn't. Like calling the police saying you were raped or that your husband beat you as a way of getting back at him. Attacking people's property, throwing bricks through windows, that sort of thing. The direct aggression is very, very rare in some of the cattier women. And one of those things in the relational aggression box is freezing people out. And what they will do is they will basically ignore you. So this is why there has been lawsuits in some workplaces that if you don't involve women in things, they consider that freezing them out. They consider that discrimination. Now, you could probably look them up yourself. I don't want to go through and try to find one. But there have been stories that men do business in the bar, or they do business over cocktails or whatever. And out of fear of sexual harassment lawsuits or whatever, they don't invite the women. And then so you turn around and you find out, oh, by not inviting the women, that's sexual harassment or that's sexual discrimination or something like that, because you're freezing them out. In this situation, this is exactly what she's talking about, is that all of the other girls are friends. If you're not one of the friends, you don't get talked to. You don't get an opportunity to be heard. You don't get an opportunity to be invested in your product. And that's the situation that she had with this match, is that she had the match, but she was basically told what to do. She didn't feel like she was really involved. And even people that she was, opponents with, they wouldn't talk to her. They wouldn't communicate with her. So at least that part has some element of truth from, experience in dealing with female bullying. There's also the running gag of Tony Khan is unreachable. I don't know where he is. I was supposed to talk to him, but I never came across him. That sort of stuff has also been one of the things that has been talked about routinely when it comes to AEW. Remember, Jonathan Gresham and several other people have said essentially, I tried to speak to Tony and I couldn't find him. Tony's a very busy man, they've claimed. But if there are stories about Vince McMahon making you sit outside of his office for hours, well, he's terrible. If it's Tony Khan who knows that you're in the building looking for him and yet he vanishes, well, he's a very busy man. He's got so many other things to do. It's a double standard that a lot of these AEW fans are holding in their minds. And I wonder how many of them really believe the stuff that they're saying. As somebody who's not really a proselytizer for women's wrestling, I have no dog in the fight. Whether women's wrestling succeeds or not is not something that I'm too interested in one way or the other. But if you're going to have women in the company, you should use them, and you should use them appropriately. But Britt Baker wanted to blame the fans for their lack of investment in a storyline or their criticism of matches. When they criticize matches and storylines of the men too, it seems a little ridiculous to me. Of course, people are going to criticize. Of course, there's going to be some negativity on Twitter. It's the nature of Twitter. It's the nature of criticism. So why do you think you're going to be special? You want to be treated like everybody else, then expect the treatment of everybody else. All right. Thank you guys for your time. I'll talk to you guys later. Peace out.